Good morning, good evening, good day, and welcome to Dramabuds. I'm Francine. I really love K-dramas, and I'm going to spend as much time as I want talking about them. Welcome to my podcast. So, hello everyone. On today's episode, we are going to talk about starter K dramas or gateway K dramas, however you want to refer to that. Okay, so where did this question even come from? I saw this tweet the other day where someone asked for what is your go-to K-drama, which you always recommend first when someone asks you for recommendations. And I interpreted it as, what would you recommend to someone who didn't watch K-dramas? All right, cool. Although I wanted to recommend my obvious favorites, the ones that I'm sure are top tier quality. Like, I know this is the best of the best, the My Misters and all that. I realized, specifically with My Mister, that some of those were a little difficult to get into. Like, some of the shows I was thinking about, some of them needed a lot of familiarity with K-dramas. Like, understanding the format. You only get 12, 16, or 20 episodes to tell a complete story. Or the common tropes. Because, yeah, there are a lot of tropes and things that are often reused in many K-dramas. And, Korean culture in general, that's something that I think when I was a new viewer, new watcher of K-dramas, like, I didn't understand why seniority is such a big deal. Being born 1 year before someone is such a huge, all the honorifics and things you have to think about, and then the drinking culture and just so many things that, at first watch, like, you don't get why these things matter. Or like, why do they treat it like such a big deal that this person, didn't respect their elder or something? Like, yeah, Filipino culture where I'm from is we're also polite and all that most of the time, but not the way that Koreans are. So I'm sure in other cultures that are much more liberal than we are, I'm sure they'll really be taken aback by all these things. So, okay, I started thinking about, okay, what are K-dramas that are easy to get into for those that, don't have a lot of experience with watching them, or for those coming from watching purely just Western shows, or for people like me before who thought that all K-dramas were rom-coms or makjangs, right? I mean, I'm very open about that. I really looked down on K-dramas before. And then look at me. Look at me now. So as I was coming up with a list, I tried to cover, a wide variety of genres because, not everyone may want romance in the show that they're watching. That makes sense. Or they want something darker or more intense, like not light and easy to get into. Like, oh, I want something gripping and really something that'll make me think. Like, okay, I'll try to accommodate that. I also kind of stayed away from mainstream, quote unquote, K drama recommendations because, one, they're always being mentioned. And, at this point, when something keeps being recommended, you start to think that it's overrated or overhyped, which I also, I also kind of believed that before. Two, I might not have liked some of these mainstream recommendations when I watched them. And three, I might think or I thought that there would be some flaw that would make it difficult for newbies. Let's just call them newbies. Something difficult would make it difficult for newbies to like this show. So just a disclaimer, this is based on popular recommendations among the Filipino K-drama community. Um, Let me name drop a few shows that when I thought of K-drama recommendations, among the Filipinos, I thought, oh, these are the first few shows I thought of. First of all, Goblin. I watched that show, right? Although I can see what others liked about it, I just wasn't that into it. And I agree that it's beautiful visually, and some of the iconic lines, like, yeah, they're beautiful. And hey, it won a Daysang for the screenplay, okay? I respect that. Although it's like that, it's beautiful but bloated. I don't know how to explain it. More like I can't really remember what happened towards like the huge middle chunk of the show. I don't know what happened between like when they had the first kiss and then when the goblin died. Dude, I don't know what happened, genuinely. Also, like a major flaw. Others might have a problem with the age gap relationship because the goblin is, of course, an ancient being who looks like a late 30s man, and then the girl is, sounds and looks 19 years old. Like, yeah, she's an adult technically, but it just feels she's a high school student. Okay, it's icky. So, I had a problem with that for almost the entire run of the show until the time skip. But most of the show, that's most of the show that passed, and I was very like bothered by it or just wasn't so into it. Okay, so that's why I think not everyone will be able to get into Goblin. Next show, Reply 1988. Okay, it's so heavily recommended here. And okay, I get it. I felt what others felt, right? I love Shin PD shows, or I have loved Shin PD shows. I felt the warmth and I loved the community that he built. Yeah, but it's really overrated. I really have to say that. It's heartwarming, definitely. Guys, 13 out of 20 episodes, I cried. I felt what we were supposed to feel. But it's super bloated. Like, that is just my number one issue with it. It's 20 episodes of almost 1.5 hours each. And it's just too much for most people. And it's already slice of life. So it's already kind of, slow and not a lot actually goes on. And if you're not instantly charmed by the community, you'd think, what is the point of this show? So although I love slice of life, it's really hard to start with that. Although, my starter K-drama, the first K-drama I fell for was Hospital Playlist. Like, the first episode of that was kind of boring. I almost didn't. Okay, here's my story with Hospital Playlist. I don't know if I talked about this in my episode, but I started watching with my sister like a few episodes in, and then I went back to the first episode. But, I already kind of knew what the show was about, and I knew it was kind of good and interesting, and the characters were fun, and the band scenes were cute, and then I went back to the start. So I didn't approach it with like, oh, I started from the beginning and saw this really kind of messy or disjointed pilot. Yeah, my approach or my experience with the Hospital Playlist is not linear, so I don't think it's a fair recommendation because others won't have the experience I did. Okay, but sorry, back to Reply 1988. Yeah, slice of life seems boring. And the 20 episodes, 1 hour, more than 1 hour runtime, it's just too much for a lot of people. Okay, last show, last mainstream recommendation. Scarlet Heart. Okay, listen to me. I have an entire episode talking about how much I actually loved Scarlet Heart, okay? I am not a hater. You'd be surprised. This is one of those kinda low quality shows that I really did love. I love it, but it's so flawed in so many ways. It's cinematography, obviously, directing, acting at times. I'll be honest, the writing, yes, the plot even. It's crazy. It's just crazy. I love it, but I would not recommend it. I think people are just blinded by the pain or the second lead syndrome that they just forget that the show is not actually that great. But yeah, this is a show where I know it's not great, but I kind of love it. So, okay. In general, I'm not saying these are bad shows, by the way, the ones I mentioned. Not at all. I mean, Scarlet Heart, it's a little bad, but yeah, not saying they're bad. And others definitely started with these shows and got super into K-dramas because of them. But I want to talk about other shows that haven't reached that mainstream level of like recommendations yet, okay? And I think the shows I'll mention, are still appealing to a wide range of viewers who fit the description that I mentioned earlier. So the first show I would recommend is 18 Again. Okay, this show, it passes the Western check. The Western audiences or those watching Western shows accept this weird concept? Yes, it passes that check because it's a remake of 17 Again, the American movie from 2009. I'm always afraid that people will make fun of like the weird fantasy concepts in K-dramas. But they can't do that here because it came from an American movie, okay? They started it first. 18 Again just did it better. This is a K-drama that has it all. Like, it has fantasy, it's a comedy, it has romance, and has so many heartwarming tearjerker family reflection moments. Like, fantasy-wise, although how it happened isn't explained at all, like, barely. He just turned 18 all of a sudden, and we never know how it really happened. But, why it happened is the main focus of that process. Like, it's tied to the lessons that the show will tell, right? So, you know what? Let's not question scientifically or, what divine being or whatever, how it happened. Let's just not question it. It happened. But what was it meant to teach him or his family, right? What were they meant to learn from him turning 18 again? Comedy-wise, the situation itself, him turning into his 18-year-old self, it's funny. The situation itself is funny. It doesn't rely too much on like slapstick humor or whatever to get those laughs. Like, it's just so absurd that you can't help but laugh at it. And Lee Do-yoon's portrayal of a middle-aged man in his teenage self's body is just perfect, okay? Side note, I also want to introduce people to Lee Do-yoon. I think I need to do people that favor. Just introduce this perfect man. Romance-wise, okay. It's there, but it doesn't cross into icky territory for the most part. Like, Jung Da-jong falling for the 18-year-old boy. Like, no. It doesn't happen that way. And honestly, man, the Western version was so much more disgusting. Like, even his daughter falling for his 18-year-old self. Or trying to seduce his 18-year-old self in a party, right? I'm sure I read that off Wikipedia. Like, dude, come on. You guys accepted that back in 2009. So, 18 Again is a vast improvement. Okay? Oh, gosh. I could have done without the various side characters and their love lines. But I guess it adds to the comedy of the show and, like, how full the cast feels. It really feels like a big community. Everyone has a story. Everyone, even though it's not always tied back to Hong Dae-yong and Jung Da-jong somehow, like, you know what? It's fine. That's how slice of life. Whoa. 18 Again is not slice of life. But it does have that community aspect or that just big cast where everyone actually has their own thing going on and they're not just supporting to each other. So cool. I like that about this show. And the most important part really is how heartwarming this show is. I mentioned this earlier, but the way it tells the theme of the story is just so good. And there are so many like heartwarming moments with teen dad Hong Dae-yong and now Ajushi, who is trying to be a good dad by being a good friend. Like, if you have not listened to my 18 Again podcast episode, it's just a big motivational talk, really, about reflecting on life and the choices that we've made, and like, how happy are we really, or how miserable are we really, or are just taking for granted some things that we should have appreciated before the opportunity to have it in your life is gone or something. I don't know, but I do think this show is just such a vast improvement of the movie it remade, and it's a complete drama. It's a complete K-drama. So many genres, and they're all well done in some way. And it's not perfect. I mentioned the side stories that I kind of got bored with and would have wanted to skip or whatever. And, they dragged out the reveal, but somehow that made a little more sense to me, so it's okay. It's not perfect by any means, but it's definitely worth watching. And hopefully, at least I think, it's very easy to love. It's easy to fall for, Lee Do-yoon, for Lee Do-yoon, period, and for Lee Do-yoon as Hong Dae-yong, and just, I don't know, I still remember after watching that show, I felt so empty. I don't know why. It wasn't empty the way like Misaeng left me empty or my Mister left me empty, but it was kind of similar to that. I'm kidding. Yeah, it's that kind of show. I really think it's easy to get into and it's easy to love. So there. Next show I would recommend to a newbie is It's Okay to Not Be Okay. This show fits the stereotype that Goblin started, right? Gorgeous in all the technical aspects. Cinematography, music, Gomunyong's outfits, even the occasional stop motion or animated parts. Like, it's really, they took so much effort into crafting all these little details and making this world so visually rich, right? I feel like it's unfair to say that the main hook of the show is how gorgeous it is. But I think that's what first captivates people before they get into the writing. And that's a problem with some K-dramas. Like, sometimes they're very pretty, but when you think about it, like, what is this story even? Or what is this even trying to teach? Or, I don't know, it's just not as solid as you think it is. But it's so pretty that you kind of overlook that. So, I would recommend a show that's very pretty, but also well written. It's the kind of show that when you get into it, it's just so gripping. There's mystery, there's romance, there are complex relationships, there are depictions of mental illness, which is very timely, of course. It's great that we're really telling more stories involving them. And I'm so glad that Oh Jung-se portrayed Moon Sang-tae, because I don't think anyone could have done it as well and as respectfully as he did. Overall, great writing delivered through excellent acting. Okay. I think the gothic fairy tale lens and Go Mun-young's character will make it easier for those coming from just Western shows. For gothic fairy tale, I think it's a familiar image, right? I cannot give any examples, but I think it's something that Western shows have dealt with or had before. And seeing it through that lens, right? That this is a gothic fairy tale. Seeing that through that lens can make it easier to accept some of the crazy things that happen in the story. Like, this is not a hyper-realistic depiction of what's going on, Sometimes it's a little crazy. Sometimes it's a little much. But it's a gothic fairy tale. So you have to rein in your, suspension of disbelief or whatever, and see what it's trying to tell while fitting that mood and all. It's like, not every story is hyper-realistic. Hello, my last recommendation had someone just turning into his 18-year-old self again. Like, okay, fantasy or not realistic things happen, okay, but there's a level that's acceptable and it fits into the theme or the vibe or the mood of the show. Like, it doesn't take you out of it. I also mentioned Gomunyong. Gomunyong is seen as like, a strong female character who is different. And I'm using the mocking voice, but like that's kind of who she is. Like many people, people coming from Western shows tend to like that instead of, the meek damsel in distress who only cries and waits for the male lead to save her type. I mean, probably she's more popular among Western audiences or whatever. Honestly, okay, speaking of her character archetype, honestly, I had Hotel de Luna on this list first because I see it as like a very basic story. It's like, it's pretty, yeah, visually pretty, but the story is basic in a way that it's easy to follow, but it just doesn't have that special something. And anyway, I decided to choose between those two, this and Hotel de Luna. And I chose It's Okay to Not Be Okay because Gomunyong and Jang Manuel are so similar, right? Right? Pretty badass girls, dressed fabulously and all that, and just kind of accept that they're not that, don't act or treat the male lead all that well. Okay. But Gomunyong just goes through so much better character progression that, yeah, and It's Okay to Not Be Okay has better writing overall. Like, I remember reading something about, like, Yojin Gu as Gu Chansung in Hotel de Luna, the male lead there. He, like, had to think of his character's own background because the script was that dry or empty and all that. And it's like, oh, sweetie. I love Yojin Gu. I think he's a really great actor for his age. And, the fact that he had to come up with that just to give his own character some depth while he was portraying it. Because it's a Jang Manuel showcase. Really, she is the main star of the show. But I ended up liking Gu Chansung so much before I even found out that Yojin Gu was a really good actor for his age. Anyway, yeah, sorry for the Hotel de Luna tangent. But overall, It's Okay to Not Be Okay is gorgeous. It's intense. And it's a showcase of great performances. So I think that will get people through that show and really enjoy it for what it is. Next recommendation, we have Doctor Romantic. Yes, I actually really love this series. I lovingly refer to it as Korean Grey's Anatomy, but without the sex. Joking aside, like, it's a fast-paced show that's almost insane. Like, it's almost there. Almost too much, right? But you somehow believe that these, equally crazy, idealistic characters can pull off whatever it is that they want to do, or whatever weird operation, or just, whatever difficult case they're dealing with. Like, somehow they'll make it through with their meager resources and their boundless intelligence and willpower. For some reason, you kind of root for that. And if you're tuned into the show, really, it's hard to get bored. Like, there's always something going on. There's always a new crazy case to deal with. But, like, of course you want the doctors to succeed, right? Of course you want them to save the life, right? You wouldn't root for them actively to fail. So you kind of think like, okay, maybe I'll root for you to do this crazy thing and take this risk. It may be the best way to save this patient's life because it's such a difficult case to handle. Like, you know what, Kim Sabu? You do you. you do whatever you want to do, Kim Sabu. I trust you. Sometimes it's kind of like the stereotypical good guys against this villainous big bad, in the form of the president of the main hospital in Seoul. But, the show, everything that happens in this show, it leans a little dramatic. So just go with it. Just enjoy the ride. And it ends triumphantly. Like, the villainous bad guy really goes through a childish breakdown because he can't handle his own loss or whatever. And yeah, a little childish, but it feels good to watch these crazy idealistic people somehow make it through. Like, it's hard not to root for them as a team. Individually, as characters. Like, I've mentioned that I don't like Kang Dongju, right? But you know what? He's part of the team. And he's one of Kim Sabu's kids. And okay, I'll support him because Kim Sabu loves him. Or supports him. But whatever So Yun-jin's character, or whatever her name is, I love her. She's the best. Okay. And the best part about watching Doctor Romantic Season 1 is that if you want more, there's Season 2. And it's so much better! Honestly, I just want to tell people to watch Season 1 so they can understand why you have to care about everyone in Season 2. Like, S2 just builds on everything. It's a bit slower. Definitely a bit slower, less crazy than Season 1. Like, it's less about, the crazy medical cases and more about the hospital politics and all that. But, I don't know, by then, you care about the entire staff. And it feels like it's really building up to something huge. Like Kim Sabu's, sickness and his dream to build a trauma center and just working together with President Minguk or whatever. What's his name? I don't know, the new president of Doldam. And then the cast is getting bigger. There are more doctors being added. And it seems like the story doesn't end here. Right? Love this show. I love Season 2. It tones down on the craziness and is a lot more grounded. But, because it's Season 2, you're not getting to know these characters from nothing. You're going deeper into them as individuals, in their relationships with each other, in their own struggles. And then you see their different dynamics with the new characters that are added. And best thing is that the old main characters are also mentioned occasionally. So this feeling that this is really a crew of people that are tight-knit, that have worked together, that have saved lives together and suffered through difficult shifts and their crazy Friday nights with so many patients in the ER. Like, there's a community here and it's just growing and growing. Gosh, I love Dr. Romantic. Season 2 more than 1, but you have to watch 1 to really love Season 2. I don't know, that's how I feel about it. Season 3 is very likely. So there's always more to look forward to. And there is the very low possibility that the entire cast will be reunited. There's a possibility that all 4 of the main leads could be brought back to Doldam. I think they really should because they kept mentioning that Yoon Seo-jung and Kang Dong-ju would come back after a year or something. So they gotta do it. They gotta do it for me. Specifically me. But yeah, I think this is the perfect time to get into Dr. Romantic. There's a very high chance that it will get another season, maybe the last season, but it's gonna be good. I have faith in it. So my next recommendation is a little far from the ones I mentioned before. I would recommend Hot Stove League to a newbie. I hesitated on this, but I wanted to suggest something that didn't have romance. Right? Because some people really might not be into it. And honestly, like, romance is so subjective. It's such a hit or miss that, it's really hard to think of a romance that everyone will love. Because, the ones that everyone loves, I'm not a fan of. And also, I wanted a show that was easy to get into and it's easy to root for the characters. Because Hot Stove League has a classic underdog story. And I think that's so universal, right? Every form of media, I don't even know where to begin. Everyone has an underdog story. Everyone knows an underdog story. And we can identify with it no matter where we're from and what we've watched before. Really, they are such underdogs that you just have to root for them. And I really emphasize how there's no romance here, and I love it that way because I really want to like beat the stereotype that all K-dramas are about romance. Like we have we have surpassed the need for romance in every show. I've been watching more shows without romance recently, and like I love it. I really do. Like it doesn't romance often takes me out of it, or it feels unnecessary. Unless it's really a rom-com or a melodrama. Like this is really the core of the story, in which yeah. You know what? It's necessary because it's all the story has. But we do not need romance in everything, guys. Anyway, I first thought it would be boring or difficult to get into this show because, of course, not everyone is into baseball. But, like, similar with my experience, they really made the information easy to digest. And you know what? If we're able to watch medical dramas or, I don't know, sci fi shows, maybe, even without the background in those fields or genres or whatever, wouldn't it be possible to take the time to understand what little sports terminology they're throwing at us, or just to appreciate the story that it's telling? Like, we can overlook whatever technical terms they're using and just like think of, well, they need to succeed somehow. They need to get through this problem somehow. This show, I think what really got me interested in it or invested in it or just engaged. Engaged is the right word. It's fast paced and it's kind of episodic or more of a crisis of the week type of show. So it never dwells too long on its problems. And what I really love about this show is that even if they're the underdogs, right? And we automatically want to root for them. Unless you want to like root for the Pelicans or whatever. I don't know what's wrong with you. But okay, even if they're underdogs, they don't magically get through their issues or quote unquote win all the time, right? It's like sometimes you gotta take the L. You gotta lose sometimes. And when they do win, you're clearly seeing how they got there or how they managed to make it. So it's like, you know what? You deserve that win because you were smart about it. You were strategic. You played the game. You played the field. I don't know. Was that supposed to be a baseball pun? Whatever. It's a smart and exciting show. I mentioned this. It's sports anime, but in K-drama form. If you're into anime, if you're into sports anime, I would definitely recommend this because you just root for them. No cap. You just root for them. And it's definitely a show that would keep you engaged. Like I don't know, in general, as long as you like just sit down and really get into it, like it's really easy to because you can't help but root for their victory. And when they lose, you just want to think that, you know what, somehow they're gonna turn this into their advantage. And they often do. So now we get into the recommendations that I kind of hesitate to give. I would recommend Stranger or Secret Forest. Yes, I would. I really hesitated to include this. But, you know, someone might say that all I recommend are like light and fun shows. There's nothing like really serious or smart. And you know what? Okay, fair. So here it is. It's a show for those who like, you know, mysteries or thrillers and they don't want any romance. Well, I believe there could be romance, but let's leave that up to season 3. Anyway, Stranger, gosh, this is the top tier, top class mystery. Like they're just it's flawless, you know, it's flawless. The build up was a bit slow. I don't just admit that. I was a victim of that, okay? I didn't know what was going on most of the time. And that may be because I'm not that smart. I couldn't come up with, you know, theories or guesses, you know, on my own about what's actually going on, who the real big bad might be, or who this or that could be. Like, I don't know anything. I just watch and I try my best. But others may have longer or better attention spans than me, or they're smarter. They can keep track of these things more than me, or they can think one step ahead. But hey, that's something that I think Stranger really excelled at. Like, they balanced the amount of, confusion and uncertainty, and also just Wang Shimok and Han Yojin not being so incompetent that they can't figure anything out. Like, it's a good balance, and you feel like you're on the ride with them. You're on the same step. You don't know more than them, but that's okay, because if you know more than them, they just seem stupid. They just seem so slow. Like, why can't you figure this out? We figured this out an episode ago. Like, no, you're on the ride with them. You were just as confused as they are. And that's great. I think many thrillers tend to, like, oh, they want to reveal one step ahead of the protagonist so that you feel like you know more than them, and they just have to get from where they are to what you know now. But then you'll be one step ahead of them again, and then they only get to catch up like towards the end. It doesn't feel like a genuine mystery. Like, it just feels like a goose chase? A wild goose chase? I don't know. Anyway, although there are lots of other mystery thrillers out there, I really do find many of them disappointing. Before I even get to finish them, like, I often do not finish thrillers or start thrillers. Just not into them. I find them just disappointing, like the overall reveal of it and just how it's all done, or not engaging enough. Like, you're just waiting for them to get from point A to point B and finally just figure out the next thing that they have to figure out. Or they have flat characters that just go through that journey. Like, plot vehicles, really, but they're not their own people. Okay, the greatest strength of Stranger, I think, is the characters. That's their greatest strength. They're complex, they're interesting, and they have good relationships or dynamics with each other. It's fascinating to watch. Like, season 1 is more of a Wang Shimok showcase. Yeah, it's really mostly about him exploring, his lack of feelings and all that. Like, I get it. But there's already, like, a sense of camaraderie as you see him working with a team to find this common goal, right? To solve this mystery or whatever. It's fascinating to see his interactions with people. How his relationship with Dongjae is just not great, or his weird, I don't know if it's a mentor-like relationship with Changjun. It's, gosh. And then there's Han Yojin, who is the only person who really understands him. Like, S1, in season 1, you really get to see him as the center of everything and how it all revolves around him. Kinda. Really. Honestly. But, okay, in general, even though he is the star of the show, because he really is the most interesting character, everyone gets a little bit of spotlight. You kind of know a little bit or even a lot about everyone else. And they're fleshed out and interesting enough that for all these characters, it feels like their story doesn't have to end here. And you know what? It did it. Because if you want more, there's season 2! Oh, Stranger 2. Although many were disappointed by it because it was different from season 1. Like, they felt underwhelmed. But then, like, you think they're going to do another crazy mystery type. Not crazy, sorry, wrong word. But, like, intricate mystery type as season 1 did. Like, don't pull the same trick twice. I'm sure there's a saying about that, but they probably can't. And why would they? Like, why do they have to do the same thing over and over again? They tried something different, and by itself, it was good. Although, like, the characters of season 1, much stronger for me. But you know what? I have a lot of thoughts about season 2. By itself and in comparison to season 1. So just listen to that podcast episode. I cannot get into it now. And my last recommendation for newbies is Misaeng. Are you surprised? at this point, I'm even telling myself, like, Francine, shut up about Misaeng. But, this is a show that I was most hesitant to put in this list because I know, I know that it seems boring and slow. I know that it's just so heavy with aspects of Korean culture, like, the seniority in the office and all that, and why, like, academic background is such a big deal, or like getting into a company with connections is so looked down upon. Like, I'm sure there's a little bit of that in other cultures as well, but it's really emphasized here, and you can see how it affects someone's daily life and all that. I get it, and then I know that it's so easy to call Jangore this pathetic, weak character, and then because he's the underdog, you expect him to, like, his journey is about becoming the greatest salesman ever. Because that's how underdog stories would go, right? And then, like, at the end of it, you would get disappointed because that's not at all what happens. Like, you know what? A part of me is just like, I don't know if I'm really recommending this because, like, I think it's great for people with no background in K dramas, or just because I want more people to watch Missing. But then I realized that, you know what? I'm not going to give you the most basic of basic K dramas. Okay, I'm gonna give you the K drama that is so far from what we expect most shows to be. I will do that for you. Gosh, Missing is a masterpiece. And what I really think is the best part about it is that, even for me, I'm not an office worker, obviously. But I think this show really captures the universal feeling of these daily office struggles. Because not everyone is Jangure who does not have a great academic or educational background, coming from a not pretty poor family or whatever, and working in Korea in an international shipping company in the sales department. Like, of course, we don't relate exactly to who he is and what he's going through, or the specifics of it. But many people have worked in an organization and dealt with difficult clients or coworkers or situations that you might have thought would be the end of your career or your life. Like, that's universal. And this is a show that tells that story, or those many stories in a way. And sometimes you make it through with flying colors. Like, sometimes you're doing so great. And sometimes you just have to get through it. That's universal. The ultimate test, really, that this show has universal struggles is the fact that my dad, who judges me for liking K-dramas so much, he ended up watching it with my sister and my mom somehow, and he liked it. Because to him, it's, yeah, very different from what he expected K-dramas to be. And, like, as someone working in an office, in an organization, he's dealt with some of these situations or these office dynamics, right? And, like, you know what? You didn't think you'd see that in a K-drama. But he did. I just think that's, like, the ultimate test, that my father liked this show enough to watch it with my sister and my mom. Like, yeah. People relate to this show. Another thing that I feared about this show is that I thought it was really slow and boring, or that others would think it was really slow and boring. But then I think that's just the vibe of the show. But if you actually watch it and see what's going on, it's not as slow as I thought it was. Like, there's always something going on with each of the protagonists and their teams. So, you know what? At the end of the day, the quality of the show speaks for itself. The stories and the lessons are more relatable than we expect them to be. And it's a show from 2014, right? It's been 7 years, but it's aged so well. Like, I discovered it in 2020 and loved it so much. Like, it doesn't feel dated at all. Some shows from 2016 feel more dated than this show. Uh, I'm not even as biased as I thought it would be. Like, I think that's the main hook of it, really. That this is just a story about regular people. There is no time traveling here or some crazy medical cases or, starting at the bottom of the league and trying to rise your way to the top before the season starts or solving a mystery and all that. Like, I'm not, sorry, I'm not looking down on the other shows I mentioned, of course. Um, what I'm just saying is that this, in comparison to the premises of those other shows, just seems so boring. And like there's nothing to it. But honestly, if you can relate to working in an organization the way Jangure and the other protagonists do, then I think there's a lot to enjoy in this show. It's universal. I feel like I've used that word so many times while talking about this show. But yeah, these are universal feelings and experiences. And I think that's something that people can relate to. And yeah, you can say that, whoa, their culture is so different from my culture. But somehow I've dealt with that, with the struggles of like working under a manager who doesn't play around with office politics, so it doesn't benefit us, or we get like passed over for promotions or opportunities abroad or something. I don't know. I don't know, man. Like, just what I'm saying is that people have gone through that. People from all walks of life can somehow relate to that. And I think that can open the doors for people to appreciate this show. So that's it for me today. I remember there's this YouTuber I subscribed to. And when I saw that she was going to talk about K-dramas on her channel, because that's not her main niche, I thought, oh, cool, I would love to hear her opinions. And then she said that this drama, this K-drama she watched, was like an American drama that happened to be in Korean. That it was on a whole other level. And when she said those, I felt so offended for some reason. Why does it sound like you're saying American TV series are on a higher level? Even if she didn't say like, oh, it's on a higher level than other gay dramas. She didn't say that, but the way she was describing it, it was as if that show's status was elevated because it was like an American show. I will not name drop the show, by the way. If you know the YouTuber I'm talking about, keep it to yourself or whatever. I just don't comment on her K-drama opinions. Anyway, you know what? To be diplomatic, maybe she's just acknowledging how different that show seemed from all the other K-dramas that she watched. Okay, that's valid. But I don't know, man. I got so into K-dramas because I realized that I didn't actually enjoy Western TV all that much. So I'm not trying to look for K-dramas that feel like Western shows. Like, why do you go to an entirely different entertainment industry looking for something like what you're not watching or what you're not listening to? Which is me talking about K-pop that sounds like Western pop nowadays. But that's a whole other can of worms. So yeah, back to that whole like American shows, whatever. I don't know if I'm contradicting myself by choosing these shows and then explaining how it would be easier to get into for those used to Western shows. Like, am I not contradicting myself by saying that these kind of have Western qualities and then kind of pandering to those tastes, I guess? But then I will not. I'm saying I'm not contradicting myself. I will defend myself because I think I chose those shows and I had that criteria, or I was thinking of that demographic in mind while coming up with these shows. But I didn't come up with them thinking these are the most similar to Western shows. Like, no, 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 no. That's not my thought process behind this. I think what's really important with a starter drama or a gateway drama is that, one, it just has to be good. Like, quality-wise, good. Plot, characters, storytelling, even the visuals. Like, it just has to be good. period. Two, I think it has to open their eyes and make them see that, good, interesting, engaging stories can be told in whatever language and it's set in whatever culture, right? It doesn't have to be the culture that you live in. It doesn't even have to be similar to the culture you're in. Like, good stories can come from anywhere, really. And lastly, a starter K-drama, I think some of them has to show that some stories and experiences are universal, right? That's kind of similar to the second one, where it can just come from whatever culture and be using whatever language. But we can recognize good stories. We can relate to good stories, whether or not we can really see ourselves in that situation literally, right? The shows that I mentioned, they meet all those criteria for me. And I wouldn't be afraid to recommend them because I can vouch for their quality, each of these, really. And if the person I recommended it to, they end up watching it genuinely, right? They really try to understand what's going on and get into it. Because some people, like, you recommend them something and then they just don't watch it properly. Or they say, like, oh, my subtitles make my head hurty and all that. Like, they didn't even try. Okay, so let's say that the person I recommended it to, they watched it to the best of their abilities and they didn't like it. Then okay, no problem. I don't feel bad about that because, like, it may not be the niche for them. They may not be into a little bit dramatic medical dramas where you just want to root for these people who are crazy idealistic, or maybe you don't work in an office so you don't understand why this is so relatable or so painful or so annoying to watch them go through all of this. Or, I don't know, maybe you want romance but you weren't into this couple here. Okay, cool. Might not be the niche or the genre or whatever for that person. But I think there's a good K-drama out there for everyone. These are just the shows that I kind of really liked. I really liked each of these. And I think they're good to start out with. Like, the most important really is opening people's eyes and seeing that good stories are out there. You can be engaged even if you have to read subtitles the entire time. Like, just try, because I think there's so much good out there in K-dramas. Side note before we end, my first K-drama last year, when I started this whole thing, was Crash Landing on You. I think I mentioned this. But my real starter or gateway K-drama was Hospital Playlist. I mentioned that earlier in this episode. Right? You see, sometimes it's not even your actual first K-drama that's going to be your starter or the gateway to the whole K-drama world. Sometimes you have to find your niche. And over a year later, yeah, Hospital Playlist really is my niche. I really do love slice of life, slow, heartwarming shows. And that's consistent. You can see that in a lot of my recommendations and a lot of my podcast episodes. Like, you know what? My gateway K-drama kind of predicted where I would be 1 year later. My tastes have not changed. Although, like, I wish they would, because I wish I liked rom-coms more. Gosh, if you have not listened to me rant about rom-coms, it's in another episode. Anyway, I'd love to hear what got people really hooked onto K-dramas. Leave a comment on YouTube or Facebook or a message to the page. I just want to know what others started out with. Maybe they started out the same as I did, or with the shows I mentioned. Or maybe they started with, like, Stairway to Heaven, or Autumn in My Heart, or Queen Sondok or something. I don't know. Some people might have started out with the classics. Or you could have started out with Goblin and Reply and Scarlet Heart and think I suck. But yeah, whatever. Just my experience and all that. So that's it for me today. Thank you for listening, and I will see you soon.